No, you got to do the question. You got to do the question.
All right, everybody gets this question.
Yeah.
We never tell them what it's going to be ahead of time
Okay.
because we want a genuine, authentic reaction.
Okay, great.
If you had to pick your entrance music, a walk-up song
Yeah.
for sports, for
Ooh.
going on stage.
When you walk into a meeting.
Yeah, walk into a meeting to kick ass.
Oh gosh.
What's it going to be?
The one that comes to mind is "Don't Stop Believing" by Journey.
Okay.
Yeah.
Never,
I just
you
like
can
the
never go
song.
wrong.
It's got a long intro, though.
Yeah, it does. It does.
Yeah.
The chorus.
There you go.
You can't go wrong.
Not Baby
You
Shark.
can't go wrong.
I'm Billy Mitchell,
And I'm Megan Metzger.
and this is CTRL ALT DEFENSE. Alrighty, well, let's kick things off and extend a special welcome to retired Lieutenant General Clint Hinote. You were the former Deputy Chief of Staff for Strategy, Integration, and Requirements at the U.S. Air Force, among many other things before that, and now you have a bevy of roles that you play since your departure from the service. But welcome to the podcast, and really excited to have some fun today.
Well, thank you so much. It's really good to be here, and I'm excited about this podcast and what it does inside of the ecosystem.
Yeah, well, thank you. And one of the things we want to do with everybody we bring on is sort of unravel some of the layers of who you are, and sort of let the listeners and watchers get to know you a bit better. Yeah. Although I think you seem to be a pretty transparent and open guy from the few minutes I've spent with you so far. I'm sure that's not, you're not this big mystery, but
hopefully not.
I think a fun way that we start each podcast is kind of icebreakers and asking you, some things that, other people might not necessarily know about you. One of the things, though, in your background is you spent time as a pilot.
Yes.
So I always love to ask, what was your favorite aircraft that you piloted?
Oh boy. So I really had kind of the tale of two airplanes in my career. I had the F-16, which for me was like the ultimate fighter.
Yeah.
It was single seat, single engine, really powerful engine. It could maneuver at 9 Gs, and at least a couple of the versions I flew, you really could sustain 9 Gs. Not very many fighters can do that. And at the very same time, I flew the F-117 stealth fighter, which is a very different mission, very different airframe. But like in one case, you were using the maneuverability. So you were all over the sky and turning, hitting the afterburner and everything like that. On the other, and when I was flying the stealth fighter, it was sneak in, sneak out, be very quiet. There was even one point where we would turn off our radios, to, suck in our antennas, and we were comms out for a while there. So I really liked both sides. It was almost like two sides of a coin. And I kind of used one half of my brain for one of those airplanes, one half for the other. I enjoyed them both. And then as far as like one of the most rewarding things I ever did, I got a chance to teach young fighter pilots how to dogfight and how to drop bombs. Like this is their first, it's their first opportunity to like get behind the stick of a high performance aircraft and try to use that aircraft as a weapon, either air to air or air to ground. And for me, that was one of the most rewarding things I've ever done, because for every class, every student, there came a point where the student got it. And you could tell. I was sitting in the back seat watching it, and you could just see it happen in front of your eyes. It was as if a light bulb goes off, just like the comic books above their head. and that happened for just about every student. And it was like the most rewarding thing that you could ever. When you go home after that happens, you're like, okay, I did something today. And so one of the cool things I get a chance to do now, I don't get a chance to teach air-to-air tactics anymore, but I get the chance to teach. In fact, I just came. I mean, I just came from Rand School of Public Policy graduation. We just graduated our first class of master's students in national security. And it's so fun to build up young people. And so so as I kind of look back in my career, I love the flying. I love the flying of the two high performance aircraft, but I really enjoy teaching too. And I get a chance to do that now, and that's a lot of fun.
I have pilots fascinate me because you're just insane, and it's what I love about pilots. But okay, you're teaching, you're in the pretty intense aircraft. There had to be some moments where you thought, this pilot's going to kill me. I mean, what was the scariest moment of teaching? You ever have to like take over or punch
No,
someone
believe it
out?
or not, when you have access to the controls, it's not nearly as scary because then you
Okay.
can just like take it and do
Yeah.
things with it. And so there were times when I had to take the aircraft, but those were rare because we had
Okay.
good rules, safety rules, and things like that. I felt pretty safe most of the time. The tougher part was I always struggled with air sickness in my
Oh,
entire
wow.
career. I almost
That's a
washed
rough
out
career to be
of
in.
pilot training because I struggled so much with air sickness, and I got over it to a degree. But when I started being an instructor sitting in the back seat, it came back.
Holy
And
shit.
so not violently or anything like that, not to get graphic or
Well,
anything,
you're
but
pulling that many G's
but
getting sick. I
it
don't
was a
know.
little bit. But the scariest time I ever had, well, I can think of two. They both were near midair collisions, and one was with a one was with a general officer who was flying, and we were doing a 2v2, and he just didn't know where he was. He was out of his block, and we were merging together in the air at very high rates of speed, and I saw this shadow out of my eye, and I realized it was another aircraft, and I went full negative G's, and only time in my, I mean, all of the dust of years comes up to the top of the canopy when you do that because you were pulling like negative 2, 3, 4 Gs. And I missed him. And we got back to the debrief and found out he never even knew I was there. And
Oh,
then there was a night when,
my heart rate's going up just
yeah,
thinking about it.
and then there was a night when I was with a student. We were at the weapons school. So that was a very different type of teaching. I was an instructor, but we were teaching really, really talented and advanced students. But just for whatever reason, the student was off of his altitude. I saw it coming, but it's at night. We're blacked out. And I barely see it. And I end up having to do another pushover to miss, and we go right over each other because at that point, as you're converging on attacks, you're going to fly very close to one another. And so I had to
Wow.
come back and debrief that one too. But luckily, considering all the hours I had and all the times I
You're
had,
still here.
I'm
Yep.
still
Yeah.
here. I feel very fortunate. I flew over Iraq many hours in a single engine fighter. And you
Wow.
never really think about that until you're actually in that situation and you realize, and back then it was the no-fly zones that we were enforcing. And so you had Saddam Hussein still in power, but of course he had his sons, Uday and Qusay.
Yeah.
And there were all
Yeah.
these stories about how they would love to get a hold of an American and torture them and all this kind of stuff. And you're
And you're
flying
in a single engine, like,
in
huh.
a single engine airplane, literally looking down, going, "If I go down, I just don't know where I hide," because it's
Not a lot
it's
of
not a lot of space,
not a lot of places to
especially
hide.
in southern Iraq. And so I will say that one of the things we're going to talk about today is acquisition, and there's a lot of improvements we can make with defense acquisition, but sometimes it works. And when you're talking about a very, very advanced military engine, like at that point, I flew both Pratt and Whitney and General Electric engines. And when you're talking about like, the reliability factor of an engine that can fly in many thousands of hours, I think our defense acquisition system works in some cases. And in that case, it worked. And not only did I make it in and out I never had a hitch of anything happen to me, but I knew so many people flying the exact same aircraft, and they're all able to get in and get out. And we're
Yeah.
very fortunate
Yeah.
because we were taking risk, and that risk
Wow.
could have been real, but it was good.
So I have one last question before we jump into the meat of it. But I have to imagine, okay, the adrenaline you have flying those types of aircraft has to be just immense. And then you start pinning on and you're in the building. How do you feel? Are you an adrenaline junkie still? Like, how do you fill that gap?
It's a good question, and it probably would require more reflection than I've done. Like anything, the more you do it, the less of like you're increasing control. Like public speaking, when first time
Yeah.
you do it, you're like
You're
totally
nervous. Yeah.
you can barely get words out. Then the thousandth time you do it, it's so much
Yeah.
better. I mean, you were a gymnast. I'm sure it was the same way. I played
Yeah.
football. That first time is you have those butterflies that first play, and then after that, I think that flying fighters is a lot like that. So as you get older in the aircraft, as you get more experience and you've seen more, I think your adrenaline level gets to a more sustained pace.
Yeah.
Now, I will tell you, in the Pentagon, uh, for me personally, it was one of the most unhealthy environments you could ever imagine. When you think about it, you're in meetings, oftentimes meetings you can't leave, you can't stand up, you're sitting down. And of course, sitting is not necessarily great for you. There's no light in the Pentagon. Even
Yeah.
if you have
Yeah.
windows, those windows don't allow in the ultraviolet rays. So it's like being in a casino for your whole day. There's that you never know when something you say or do could have really big
Totally.
ramifications
The ripple
for
effect.
people you care about because you're always representing something or someone.
Yeah.
And so the type of adrenaline that we had in the Pentagon, I did not find to be. I found it like I needed some real. And as I reflect now, and as I counsel people who are
Yeah.
working in the Pentagon and kind of coach them through different things. Everybody needs a way of kind of refilling their cup after that and being able to recover. Some people really use meditation or mindfulness well, and I would have
Yep.
done that better had I known. Exercise is really important, sleep
Yeah.
really important, good diet, but these are things that are hard to do in a place like the
Sure.
Pentagon. And all of that to take care of yourself, I think would have been, at least for me, as I look back, I'd have done a better job of that. And when I get a chance to talk to people, that's almost always one of
Yeah.
the things I talk about
Totally.
with
Yeah.
them.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, I have a different career trajectory, but I kind of equate to I was a college gymnast,
Right.
like you said. And yeah, the adrenaline of a gymnastics meet after a while, you're going in, you're doing your job. I took up different activities like triathlons and stuff, trying to kind of
Yeah.
fill that
Yeah.
gap. Starting a business,
Mhm. Yeah.
starting companies,
Uh-huh.
different kind of adrenaline,
Yeah.
different kind of stress, but there's still no adult feeling of flipping. That's
Mm.
the one thing. The
Mm.
closest I
Can't say I've
found is
ever flipped.
going
Mm.
on the playground and swinging and closing my eyes when I take my daughter up and be like,
Ugh.
"What are you doing, mom?" I'm like, "Just trying to feel like
Yeah.
I'm flipping through the air again."
Yeah.
So it's probably similar. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously different than pulling 9 Gs in an aircraft,
Yeah.
but
Well, I think it's one of the things that I think is underappreciated is how physically demanding flying is at
Mhm.
that level. It's really physically demanding. And I look back now and I think about some of the things that I did in my 20s when I was going hard and I didn't even realize how hard I was
Yeah.
going. You just as an example, dogfighting is really physically demanding when you're in an airplane like that.
Yeah,
And
mentally too,
and I
just
think honestly, I think our pilots today are much more attuned to that than we were. Like if you go to places like Luke Air Force Base in Arizona, where we're training the next generation of pilots, you'll find great gyms and they're all in there
Mm.
and they all look like Greek gods and goddesses. And you're just like, okay,
Playing volleyball.
I mean, for us, well, yes, but we were all
That's
eating Snickers and drinking Cokes, and
like
they're all
doing
like having
protein
their, oh
shakes.
yeah,
Yeah.
oh, and that's, by the way, that's exactly what they ought to be doing.
Yeah.
And I'm so happy that we were able to kind of like turn that because they're so much better informed about the physicality of their job
Totally.
than we were.
Yeah. That makes a
Fascinating.
lot of sense.
Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna start with a yes/no question,
Okay.
and I think I know the answer. Are we ready for the next major conflict?
Oh gosh. Okay. So I have to. This is the it depends part just comes out. By the
Yeah.
way, no. Now, if the next challenge is beating the crud out of Iran through bombing, we're okay.
We're doing
We'll
okay.
be
Yeah.
okay with that. If the next challenge is standing toe to toe with China in China's near abroad, we're not ready for that. And I didn't come to that conclusion. The evidence just piled up over, especially in the 2010s all the way to 2020. So as an example, our chief of staff, General C.Q. Brown, wrote a white paper. It said accelerate change or lose.
Mhm.
That was
Absolutely.
intentional. I mean, that was by the way, something that people don't know. Simon Sinek helped us with that.
Yeah.
With that messaging. The original, I think the original title was Accelerate Change or Die.
It's funny because I mess it up all the time.
Yeah, no,
Or
exactly.
die.
But I mean, General Brown, it meant something for someone with his credibility to say we could lose. And it was important that he put that white paper out. The evidence up to that point, though, was continually building in the direction of we're not ready for the challenges it's getting ready to present ourselves. A good example of that was this incredible piece of work that was done through the Office of Net Assessment and the RAND Corporation, and it was called the Overmatch Brief. It was a classified brief. It was given up on the Hill, numerous audiences. It grew in time, and they've re-upped it several times since. But incredibly brilliant former Pentagon official, now RAND researcher, David Ekmonik, was the lead researcher for that one. It was presented in a flipboard of posters, which was brilliant because it allowed people to see the evidence as it was being as built up over time. But generally, what we were finding was in our most compelling war games, the ones that we had the most confidence in, as we were coming to the end, like from about the 2015-ish timeframe on, the most compelling war games, the war games that we felt like were most accurate, we were losing them. And people were like, why? Nobody really believed this, because this was the time when the standard mantra for a leader in the military was, we're the best in the world. We're at the top of our game. No one's ever had a military like ours. And that was like part of every speech, which of course is
inspiring in some ways, but demotivating in others.
It's one of those things that
took your foot off.
You don't want, I can't imagine very many successful coaches telling their teams over and over and over, you're the best in the world. You're the best in the world. Most coaches would want to have that now,
one game at a time,
continuous improvement, trust the process. We're going to get better this practice. We're going to try something new here. And if the most successful coaches in these very, very competitive leagues, they always are adopting something new. I mean, if you go look and you see some the most successful teams, they're also some of the most innovative teams. And they're not telling themselves we're the best in the world. They're telling themselves we need to get better today. And I kind of wish that mindset would have been the dominant one that we would have had, but it wasn't. I mean, we were telling each other we're the best in the world. We're the best in the world. I don't necessarily think that's bad for some audiences, but it was not good for those of us who were trying to figure out what the military looked like in the next generation, as we were seeing these new challenges develop. As a China, it wasn't that long ago that we looked at China like it was a friend. We were not out there trying to go, we're going to go fight China one day. In fact, there were only a few really lonely voices saying that. Andy Marshall was one of the late Andy Marshall from the Office of Net Assessment. He actually was saying, keep your eye on China. They're the ones that are going to be the major dominant threat to the United States. But generally, most of us were like, okay, China, they're opening up as they get more affluent, as their middle class grows. They're going to kind of come our way. And that was kind of the way the world felt. And honestly, had it not been for certain successions of their leadership, that's where we might be today. It wasn't inevitable that Xi comes to power and that Xi takes them in a certain direction. But by, the 2018, 2019 timeframe, it began to look like, they're really pouring into their military. And not only that, but they're pouring into their military in a way that directly challenges the way that we thought about our military power, like how we thought we were going to fight. And so when I say that, no, we're not ready, we still haven't totally adjusted to the disruption that happened when China invested in its anti-access area denial capabilities. It invested well, it thought through it, that there were times when all they had were words and chalkboards. And they were still thinking through what it would take to challenge the United States. That's the symbol of a worthy adversary. And so as we talk about, are we ready? We haven't totally adjusted to that disruption. And when we adjust, I do think the majority of us are getting there. I do think there's reason for some optimism. I don't think we're going fast enough. I don't think we accelerated change. I do think we're in danger of losing. And that's why I say no.
I mean, there's so much to unpack there. We talked about college gymnastics earlier, so I have to stick with the theme for a second, but I did have a coach and she'd always say, today we do what they can't. So or they won't. Today we do what they won't. So tomorrow we can do what they can't. And like someone's out there working harder than you. And that's kind of what our adversaries started to do. But, I'm coming at a lot of this from a tech perspective, as you know, and then subsequently, like, all of the unsexy stuff surrounding the tech that we need to get done. And there's some places where we're pretty
Mm,
overmatched. It's gonna be hard. And then there's other places, the non-kinetic fight, the fight that's moving, into places we can't see, where we look at the rate of change of technology and I go, that's that's where we're most vulnerable. But
yeah.
what do you agree? Where do you think we're the most vulnerable right now?
Well, there has been a dominant view of military power in the United States. We're still struggling to break free of that paradigm and get to the new paradigm. That new paradigm is informed and enabled by all of these technologies. And so autonomy, artificial intelligence, it will be in that way for quantum networking, incredible networking,
Yeah.
communications. There are certain just physical technologies, electric engines, as an example. And then there are all sorts of very interesting flight technologies that space technologies, space launch, very different ideas about that. All of that comes together, and it's the blend of all of that that creates this new military paradigm. And I just don't feel like we've gotten rid of the old one and gotten to the new one. There's a lot of reasons for that, but we've invested a lot in the old paradigm. We just have, and there is a sunk cost. This is where I believe if we write the postmortem, or we could write the premortem today on why we might lose in the future, one of the reasons would be we felt this very heavy sunk cost in things like fighter airplanes and aircraft carriers, battle tanks, and so on. Those things aren't bad. In fact, in some parts of the world, in some scenarios, they'd be awesome. But it just feels like the scenarios where we may be challenged are not the scenarios where those types of equipment are the best suited.
Yeah.
And and a lot of that, I think, has to do with the advent of all the new technologies and how fast military technology is
Yeah.
changing because of that. And then trying to figure out things like, how much do we really want to trust machines to do? Because
Yeah.
that's a
Sure.
fundamental question, and it's not a question that is easy to answer. And as much as I would like to say, trust the machines more, I just was hearing a news article this morning on the radio saying, yesterday Tesla starts driving around autopilot in Austin. And today, the people in Austin are saying they're all making illegal turns and all this kind of stuff. That's part of the growth
Yeah.
experience of technology. I'm not saying that I, necessarily want to be, walking around Austin
I've
with
been in
Teslas
an
all there. And
autonomous, taxi down there
but
before.
what I do believe is that for military purposes, autonomy is transformative, and being able to figure out how quickly we can get to an autonomous force, how much we can scale the autonomous
Yep.
force, and how tactically that looks like. What does human machine teaming look like at that tactical level? I mean, we're seeing glimpses of it in places like Ukraine. I think also in the Israel-Iranian conflict right now. But it will be different because of the way that we would
Sure.
fight any of those types of adversaries would be different. That doesn't mean that we would just go back to, big formations of battle tanks and large flights,
No.
with fighter
No.
planes and everything. We probably wouldn't. The battlefield has the potential to be so lethal that we would not want to put a ton of American boys and girls into that. And so that means we have to think different. We have to field different stuff at scale.
Yeah.
And I just don't know that we've made that turn yet
Yeah. I
in
mean,
our
I
thinking.
do think we're making progress. I've spent a lot of time on the Army side talking about human machine integration work,
Yeah.
or, to use a very Army term, like steel before blood, and how do we start shifting that approach.
Yeah.
But when I spent some time out in the CENTCOM AOR, before, relatively quiet, but still shockingly not quiet at
Yeah.
all, what struck me was where I thought some of what I saw, now just Megan Metzger, kind of view of the world in that moment, was some of our most vulnerable places felt like where we were actually killing a fly with a sledgehammer. And we have
Mm,
these really large counter UAVs, and they're in the, our adversaries in the field, and every
yeah.
single one-way UAS looks different because they're
Right.
tinkering and they're sending and stuff. And when they're coming in low and hot and we can't defend at that
Mm.
altitude, like that's the kind of stuff that, how do you quickly, like kind of quickly adapt to that? That's kind of what I'm seeing. But
I don't know that you're going to want to present a lot of targets to short range drones in the future. I just don't know that that's a winning strategy. It's going to be very difficult to defend against the amount of short range drones that a potential adversary could put up there. And so you have to kind of think about, what does that mean? I think a good way of helping people think through the types of military that we need, there's kind of like three different areas or three different fights. And you said steel before blood. I think of that as being the front area where we're confronting our adversary, probably in their backyard. So this would be an area where it's going to be incredibly lethal. The electromagnetic spectrum is going to be scrambled every way you go. You're not going to be able to access your navigation systems. Comm is going to be very difficult. Everything that's flying, you have no idea if it's friend or foe. It
Yep.
could kill you. It could be on your side. You probably in your formation have multiple of these things out there flying or running around the ground. You have loitering munitions. And this is an area where it's really difficult to live. And you don't want to put large amounts of people in that. This is
Yeah.
going to be that front area. Then you kind of, if you take kind of a step back, you have this area that's kind of contested, but it's not at all clear that your adversary can project good power into there. A good example of this would be if we were defending Hawaii against China. Well, I actually think carrier strike groups work really well in that situation. I want lots of attack submarines in that
Yep.
situation. A lot of the things that we have invested in the past work really well when your adversary has to overextend. And so that's kind of a second area, which is kind of the middling area. I think we have overmatch there right now, and I think we'll probably be able to keep overmatch. But this is where the sunk cost fallacy comes in, because if you keep on doubling down on that, you may not be able to feel that scale, the stuff you need in the forward area. And then the final area, which I'm really happy about, people are talking more and more, is the homeland defense. It has been true for a long time
Yeah.
that the American homeland is under increasing threat. And I am not talking about just cyber. I am talking about everything that you can imagine, from nuclear weapons all the way down to one-way drones. And we aren't ready for that. And that's really important. And when you talk about like what we would risk to defend the American people, we'll risk everything. This is like, if you have to, you fly your aircraft, and if you have to knock down a incoming fighter or bomber aircraft, you do it, whatever it takes. And so defending the American people that's kind of that third area. And you're going to do anything and everything you have to do that. And so this is where I'm really glad. I mean, I like the talk about Golden Dome. I think the technology is going to be really challenging, but that hasn't stopped
Yeah.
us in the past in certain areas. And what I'm hopeful for is that the idea, the importance, the priority of homeland defense, as reflected in the president's executive order for what was Iron Dome and now Golden Dome, that's a good thing for us. We need that. We need to be able to refocus our reserve components on that. Our National Guard needs to be thinking about homeland defense. There are great technologies that can help us with homeland defense. And so I'm excited about that. But if you think of it as kind of like area one is that area where you want to put as much autonomy as possible because you just
Yep.
don't want to
Yep.
put a lot of
Mhm.
American lives there. Area two is, well, you want to meet us on our neutral
Yeah.
playing field? We're fine with that. We'll be happy to play a
Yeah.
straight up game with you if that's what you want. You're probably not going to like the outcome because we're pretty good at that.
Yep.
And then the third is homeland defense. And if you try to hit us in our homeland, we will stop you and we will make you pay. And I think those kind of three areas are where we have to
Yeah.
get to. I think the area where we're most challenged in thought is in that forward area. And then the area where we need some of the biggest actual organizational reforms is in that homeland defense area.
Obviously, there's a bunch of different, like as you just described, thoughts about where we could invest these resources and how we should attack it, so to speak, through acquisition and programming. How do you sort of break away from that sunken cost, that legacy bureaucracy, that institutional resistance that has kind of slowed us down? I mean, I know it's a $1 million question, but
It's a $1 billion
billion,
question.
Yeah.
Billion.
It's a
trillion, maybe.
multi-billion-dollar
Yeah.
question. Yes.
Well,
But as you start to think about disrupting that
Yeah.
bureaucratic way that has slowed us down, or that sunken cost that is sort of tying us down, how do you
Yeah.
make that change?
I've thought a lot about this. I feel like we're not going to be able to break out of the current set of paradigms unless one of two things happens. The first is we would really lose, and the crisis happens. Democracies tend to adapt to crisis, and I don't want that to be true. It would be a
Same.
tragic. No, but
Yes.
I mean, I think
No,
it's
I'm
something we
serious.
have to be.
Yeah, that's what I was
But
thinking
we
too, yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
there will
we can't
be.
pretend that we are always gonna be on top. I agree.
Yeah.
No, I mean,
Yep.
I, I, I do think we have to be ready for the day after a crisis happens
Yeah.
and we lose.
Yeah.
I don't because you don't stop. It's kind of like
There's no time to
you don't like sit there and go, oh well, I guess we lost. I guess we're the gig's up. No, you're going to do something about it afterwards.
Yep.
The other thing that could happen is you could get some really big reform that would force us to think about the problem
Mhm.
differently. And as an example, I believe that the service structure of budgets, the fact that the services control a lot of the budget in the Defense Department, has been really, really good for certain types of technologies. But in general, we have given up relative advantage to our adversaries because those service budgets are not focused on those three fights
Yep.
that we were just talking about, those three in-depth possibilities. And I do think that there needs to be some breaking up of the service hold on budgets in order to get to the type of acquisition
Mhm.
that you're going to need. And how do you do that? I think that this is where we always talk that we would think joint, but it's really hard to think joint.
Yeah.
And so how do you break that paradigm? I actually believe that a major portion of the procurement budget needs to go to something that feels like a joint process of acquisition. And that would be informed by a future concept that puts everything together the way that we think we're going to need to fight. That would probably require civilian leadership at the very highest level, something that feels a lot like a service secretary for the joint force. And those types of paradigm changes, absent some major reform like that, and the Goldwater Nichols Act of '86
Yeah.
really was a paradigm breaker in certain ways. And I think you need something at least as
Yeah.
big. And if you don't have it, you're probably going to muddle along. We'll make acquisition reforms. I think some of the reforms we've already made have been great.
Yep.
And I'm seeing some great stuff come out of both the Senate and the House. The House just released the SPEED
Mhm.
Act.
Urge
Yeah,
and yep.
Forge.
Yep.
And I've talked with these staffers, the ones who are actually putting pen to paper on this legislation, and I hope they listen. I'm really impressed with the types of reforms they're proposing, the types of legislation that we might be able to pass as soon as this year. That takes a lot of work to do, and those staffers have been working overtime to get these acts in place, and I think you're gonna get votes on them. I think the majority of the reforms will get
Yeah.
through, and I think that'll be good. Is it enough?
That's the
It
I
question.
know yet.
well
I don't
well,
know.
I'm gonna stop you for a second because that's where I think you and I have talked about this for quite some time. We have things like PPBE reform and I've been a long believer of we can't wait. And we actually have enough tools to really get after this. In the case of budget, I know I think it was years ago when you were still in, you were actually kind of leading the charge on some of the efforts to kind of bring it into the department, ahead of your time, I would even argue in some cases. But we talked about the budget and how do you actually start doing outcomes based budgeting and really look at that fiscal agility. And I'm seeing like we're doing some work where I see a lot of traction where we actually are realigning budgets around capability so that you and then collapsing the number of PE lines so that you can move it. But the simplest thing that has been the most game changer from the like way down the chain and the budget folks is rewrite them so that you're not specifying what capability you need and rewrite to like what problem you're solving.
Yeah.
I don't need ship detection. I mean, I need ship detection. It could be an eagle, it could be a shark. It doesn't matter. Why are we specifying exactly the technology that's antiquated the day that budget comes out?
Well, so you're getting to requirements reform, which is something that is badly needed. And as I was the head of requirements for the Air Force for 3 years, I came
Is
away
that where
from
all the
that.
gray hair happens?
Yeah, I mean, look, there are a
It's
ton
a
of people
hard
doing
job.
the best that they can
Yes.
in the requirements world. And I do think that what I took away from that experience was the over specification of requirements came from, I think there were kind of 2 things that all kind of mingled together. There was this, idea that the warfighter, um, didn't really trust the acquisition system to produce.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
so that was where you kinda said, "Well, if they're gonna hear my voice, I have to be really, really
Like, let
specific.
them know that
Like,
I'm yeah.
I need the aircraft to go this altitude and this speed," and things like that. And then I also think there's this idea that the warfighter is limited in all pretty much all the people who write requirements are people who have been doing it for 25 years or
Yep.
more, and that's good. And it's also bad. And,
Yep.
it's
Yep.
good from the like, they have this deep appreciation for the
Yep.
operational problem. It's also bad in that they only probably did it one way in the whole
Yep.
25-year
Yeah.
period. And when you're thinking about, like, the new, the disruptive, the
Sure.
things that are happening to us, that our environment is disrupting us, our adversaries are disrupting us, sometimes that 25 years of experience in this operational problem set leads you to not see the disruption happening. You see your identity in the types of ways you've been doing it in the past.
Sure.
So if you're an aircraft controller, you probably see your identity as looking down at a
Yeah.
scope and trying to figure out where everybody is and putting it all together. Not that you probably are flying in the back of an aircraft to do some of that. And the idea that maybe it could be done in a very, very different way
Mm.
is it's hard to get there. And it's really hard when you're writing the requirement to allow yourself to write it in a way that would be open to that type of solution. And so this is
Yeah.
where I
Especially
really
I put a lot of this on the Hill too
Mhm.
because of the way that they're holding them accountable is not necessarily like, you're incentivized almost to be more prescriptive because 'cause they're
You are.
demanding that type of
Well,
reporting, which
and
that needs to change,
the
right?
reporting level, especially in the appropriation side of the defense committees, I mean, I understand they are stewards of the taxpayers' money. They wanna make sure that the taxpayer is
Yeah.
getting value. And there have been plenty of reasons why,
Yeah.
that it hasn't gone well in the past. And so, yeah, I understand the need for
Yeah.
reporting. I do think that today's technology and today's speed requires a shared consciousness between the legislative branch and the executive branch. So this is where the idea of we're going to share information with you real time on what we're funding, how that's going, what the execution timeline is, where the milestones are. And instead of just us briefing you once every so often, whatever that looks like, and it always gets pushed back because everybody's busy, is I'm going to share it with you real time. And then you, appropriators, come in and if you see something you're really not liking, then fine, let's have a talk about it. But otherwise, give us flexibility to make changes along the
Yeah.
way. This is where I know that you've worked on this idea of a portfolio of capabilities within PEOs, and the PEOs need the flexibility to be able to make real time decisions on things that are working, things that are not working within their portfolios. And they should share that with the appropriators, but the appropriators should just it's almost like, by exception. They should monitor it, and as long as it's reasonable what the
Yeah.
PEOs are doing, I
Yep.
think the appropriators would be wise to let it go and to see where it goes. And then if you need to, hold the people accountable.
Yeah.
And we really have not gotten to a level of accountability that I think we need. But then if you're gonna hold them accountable, give them the tools that they need to be successful.
Yeah.
And so there's a very different mindset. It's almost like and I saw this in Republican administrations and Democratic administrations. There was this adversarial relationship with Congress, and it can't be that way. The powers are shared by the Constitution, and if we're gonna fix acquisition, and if we're gonna fix requirements, and we're gonna get our warfighters what they
Yep.
need, you have to have communication between those 2, and they can't we have to at some point be on the same team.
Yep.
And this is where I'm actually pretty
Yep.
happy with, like, Chairman Rogers and Majority Leader Smith in the House Armed Services Committee, and they came up with this SPEED Act together, and they released it together. Their staffs worked on it together, and that has the potential to be helpful like really helpful.
Yeah. When I know and you and I had an opportunity to work with one of the POs in particular on that concept, and I think the thing that actually worked the best, and this might have even been part of your brainchild, is go forward and tell Congress, here's how you're going to hold me accountable, and here's why you care. And actually understanding why that individual, that human, we forget they're human
Mhm.
sometimes, cared, and it worked. And so it wasn't rocket science, it wasn't some elaborate, change of authorities. It was a simple, this
Yeah.
is what we're going to do. Here's how you're going to hold me to it. And here's why it's important for you. And it's shocking how much that works.
Well, let me just add to that because I don't know who's listening, but here's a game changer approach to dealing with Congress. Be authentic. I'm just telling
Totally.
you, I have seen so many officials go over to the Hill and they over in the Pentagon, they can, you're talking about it, you're talking, and you're having these really important, in-depth, authentic conversations and they clam up when I mean, it is like they're going and being interrogated and they can't give up any information or else they'll hurt
Yeah.
their organization. And I'm just telling you, you have to, as it can be very uncomfortable. If you're authentic with members on the Hill, I have found they will almost always see it. They'll respect you for it. They may still disagree with your position. Okay.
That's fine.
In our democracy, there's room for that.
Yeah,
They will respect the fact that you came over and that you
for sure.
talked to them like human beings and that you didn't assume that they were stupid or that they had the worst interest of the Department of Defense at heart. If you go and you be authentic with the members of Congress, my personal experience was that it paid tremendous dividends.
And they're
You run
humans.
risk when you do it,
Yeah.
right? I mean, being authentic does come with a whole different set of risks.
Sure.
But in today's world, if you're authentic, this is in almost
But
any
then
leadership
they're gonna
position.
hold you accountable to something different. Now, I know we're probably coming up on a little bit of time, but I wanted to hit on something, kind of going back to some things you talked about. You talked about
Mm,
reform, you talked about, the requirements and people are doing their best. Talked about the anxiety level and different adrenaline, the hill. Now, you might not remember this, but years ago when you were in and we had an opportunity to work together, you had made some comments to me. My old adage was most senior leaders didn't come up through the ranks thinking they're going to manage major tech programs. And now literally everything is. And you had lamented to me at one point, you can deny it if you want. You were one of the youngest 3 stars in the building, and maybe the one of the few that had tech knowledge, or at least the curiosity for the tech knowledge. What needs to do you think that's changed? And what do we need to do to train our leaders differently? And
sure.
I'll add the second part and then I promise I'll shut up. But I've been fascinated, and one thing that we've been working on at Decode, and you saw some of this in some of the EOs, was like training in action. And how do you actually do operational training, not in the I'm using a weapon system, but in like
Right.
acquisition, in requirements, and all of that. So what just give me the if you're king for a day, how do you retool folks just given how fast the environment's changing?
So it is true that the way that you become a military leader is you work your way up the ranks. And that typically means that by the time you are a senior leader, you're old. You're certainly older than most in the military itself. I think as we look at the senior officer ranks, we are seeing a change in their tech savviness, but not fast enough. It's kind of like the
Yeah.
accelerate, change, or lose. It is so difficult for them to learn I mean, it's difficult for all of us to keep
Yeah.
up
We got
with
our day jobs too, right?
I mean, well, they do,
Yep.
if you look at their calendars are typically pretty booked from 6 o'clock in the morning till after 6 in the evening, and it's
Yeah.
hard to find the time to improve yourself. One of the things that happened to me was your course, the course that Decode put together under the sponsorship of the Defense Innovation Board, and the point is to take senior officers and to introduce them to defense innovation in a new way. And that was quite seminal for me. It was an important step in my education. And it is so critical that the people who are making decisions about technology are the ones like they have some level of knowledge about what it is that they're talking about. a lot of the decisions that senior leaders are making are in the or they have the ramifications for technology policy. They may not think of it that way in a lot of the JADC2 decisions that are being made. Those are technology policy decisions. And it's very difficult if you don't have a appreciation for what your second and third tier consequences might be to make good decisions in that environment. So there's no substitute for an attitude of continuous learning and development. If you're going to be a leader in any field, but certainly in the military field, you have to be considering that you've got to be always learning, always growing, always learning new things. And go back to the analogy of a coach. The coach is always learning new things.
Yep.
The successful ones are. They are running different offenses than they were 10 years ago. They're running different defensive schemes than they were 10 years ago.
Yep.
They're looking at innovation. They're learning and growing, and they're finding out what the best practices
putting new
are.
weightlifting programs.
There's all sorts of new things that are happening. And generally, I do think our military has a continuous learning and improvement culture. The senior leaders who are in such positions of authority and, let's be honest, positions of pressure, personal pressure, stress, it's so important for them to find the voices they can learn from, learn about things like artificial intelligence, learn why certain policies might have a chilling effect on innovation, and be able to understand how they're leading within that. Now, what does that probably mean? It probably means you're listening to young people and you're probably learning from young people. And there's nothing wrong with that. In our world, I think it is really important that the senior leaders have direct lines of communications with young people who are talented in these areas, who do understand the ramifications of the decisions. It's not that they'll make the decisions, but they absolutely can inform them.
Yeah.
And we had people like that, people who became household names within the Air Force, as an example, because they were so good at certain technologies. And they were the people that were on my speed dial.
Yeah.
I would call them, I'd be like, okay, I'm hearing this. Is this what you're seeing? And I would always learn something from them. And those are the ones who are the diamonds in the field. And, there's been a push to protect those people recently from the standard pressures of promotion. And I'm hopeful that push works, because we need these. They're unicorns in many ways, and we need them, and we need to attract them. We need to keep them. We need to listen to them and grow. And I think that when a senior leader comes with humility and is able to learn from people like them, you have a potential to really be really helpful.
All right. And have your phone a friend.
Well, I mean, I think everybody should have a network of people who are older than them, who can help them think through things but by living those older people have experience. That experience is really valuable. And I think that everybody needs a network of people who are younger than them, especially if you're going to lead young people, and to be able to kind of understand how they're seeing the world and how communication might work in that regard.
Sure.
So, I think it's important that everybody has something like that.
Yeah. Totally agree. And you've been a great one for me. So thank you. But all right, we have fun questions.
Yeah.
We have to do our fun
well,
questions.
the coach metaphor, just like, it got me thinking, and I feel like I want to throw that one at you first.
Sure.
You said you're a football guy, so I imagine you still follow closely, or at least have some coaches that you respect and think of in that light. So are there any out there, football?
Well,
I mean, any sport.
I mean, when the thing that I respect about coaches who stay at the top of I think right now the National Football League is incredibly competitive, right? So the rules are just really well done so that you have a chance every year to be successful. Sure. And so watching some of the coaches who are learning, growing, adapting, and changing, applying innovation, you're clearly seeing this. I mean, so as an example, the advent of the run pass option, that is a new concept built off of an old concept of the option, but it's brand new. And it has taken over pretty much all of pro football and a lot of college football too. The fact that coaches saw what was going, like somebody had to innovate that. Somebody had to allow that to happen. You had to give your quarterback an incredible amount of leeway, just honestly.
Game,
and so the coaches who can coach and adopt those new concepts quickly are the ones that I think are just involved.
Tush push, yes or no?
Well, yeah, it's an innovation, right? And until somebody stops it, it's an innovation you're going to keep on seeing.
I think that should be the title of the
podcast.
Yeah,
I mean, yes, look, until somebody figures out how to stop it, we'll see.
Or you build a rule so that they can't do it. That's
and they may happen. They almost happened this year. So.
Yeah.
No, you got to do the question. You got to do the question.
All right. Everybody gets this question. Yeah. We never tell them what it's going to be ahead of time because we want a genuine, authentic reaction.
Okay, great.
If you had to pick your entrance music, a walk-up song for sports, for, going on stage.
When you walk into a meeting.
Yeah, walk into a meeting to kick ass.
Oh, gosh.
What's it going to be?
The one that comes to mind is Don't Stop Believing by Journey.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just like the song.
It's
got a long intro, though.
It does. It does.
Yeah,
the chorus.
You can't go wrong.
Not Baby Shark.
You can't go wrong.
I was at a Nationals game a few years ago, and somebody had Baby Shark.
But it's genius because then you still talk about it, and everyone started wearing shark hats.
It was part of the moment.
It was great branding.
It was. Yeah.
We look back fondly upon those times because.
Because
if you're a Nats fan
a little
today,
bit more,
not great. No Baby Shark. There's not a lot of fans who are doing anything positive these days with that team. But
that's true.
Yes.
Love your city. Okay.
I do. I'm proud of the Nats for not spending money on players.
I've had fun every time I've gone to a Nats game. I mean, they sometimes they're really bad, and sometimes they're okay. And
but
one year they were really good
with the sausage,
but it was
and
fun.
people I like.
Yeah. I think it's a really good time.
Yeah.
Great stadium. They do a good job.
Yeah.
Just wish they would invest in their players. So
yes. Maybe one day.
Much to ask.
We'll talk about sports on the next
Speaking
podcast.
of investing in the future.
Yes, exactly.
All right.
But Don't Stop Believing. That's the song. Play it out. We'll put that as the play out music.
Sounds good.
Episode if we can get it. It was a pleasure to speak about all of this just fascinating topic. Very critical and obviously important to the next several years. So
hopefully it's helpful. And defense innovators need to know they're not alone. Legislative innovators need to know they're not alone. I'm seeing across the ecosystem movement in the right direction. So I'm excited.
Oh, maybe we can get some football coaches in the Pentagon to.
There are a few. Yeah. There are, and they bring a very positive mentality. I think coaches of all different sports are in the Pentagon, and I think the good ones. Coaching is leadership, and it's a very potent style of leadership, and it's a style that I think works really well in the U.S. military.
Well, on that note, thank you, sir.
Yeah, it's great to be here with both of you.
All right, more to come.
Yep.